Many Americans and many people worldwide don't even know Pacific Island peoples exist. American schools, textbooks, and teachers often don't mention America's other indigenous peoples or these territories. What most Americans do know is often romanticized ideas about island paradises and tourist hotspots. In real life, these Pacific Island nations were seized by outsiders, by America, Britain, Germany, Japan, France, Spain, Portugal, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. These islands were taken for military bases, for resources, plantations, and local labor. The takeovers were often very violent, and also with a high death rate from disease. Most invaders had no intention of ever giving these people independence, the vote, or civil rights. Some only became independent as recently as the 1990s. Some remain under outsider control even today and are denied the vote and civil rights. Some of these peoples have become minorities in their own homelands, their languages and religions at times banned, their young forcibly assimilated. But it did not have to be this way. These islands could have remained independent nations. The colonizers could have been defeated or convinced to give independence. Some could have become states with full rights within the nations that invaded them. Some Pacific Island people could even become leaders within the colonial powers. My name is Al Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. My next history book will be Genocide Denial in America, about the 7 genocides against indigenous people that took place in the U.S. that most people were never taught about, don't know, or deny. I've also written some science fiction, mostly alternate history. One story, Timely Saviors, appeared in a short story collection, The Witness Paradox. I'm also, together with Rob Schmidt of Bluecorn Comics, editing and putting out a short story, alternate history collection, What If Natives Won? Perhaps called Killing Columbus. I've also written a sci-fi alternate history book, The Man in Black, the first of a series. Today, over 7 million Americans have no right to vote in national elections. They can't vote for president. They have no voting congressmen or senators. The Constitution doesn't apply in U.S. territories. Most U.S. laws don't apply in territories, not unless Congress specifically says so. They have no power over their own debt and can't negotiate it or issue bonds the way a state can. They are colonies. They exist for the U.S. to take natural resources, labor, military bases, and set up tax schemes for U.S. corporations while its people have fewer rights. And they are almost completely made up of people who are not white. 2 of these territories, these colonies, are Samoa and Guam. Together they have nearly 250,000 people. The Northern Marianas near Guam adds 60,000 more. They are some of the poorest places in the U.S., and they also have some of the highest enlistment rates for the military. Both have independence movements, and both have movements for statehood. We talked about independence for each at the last 2 videos. How could they have become U.S. states, and when? The first most obvious time was when Eisenhower proposed and made Hawaii into a U.S. state. After World War II, the colonial empires are being pushed to give up their empires. The British lose India and start to lose colonies in Africa. The French are defeated in Vietnam and Algeria. The Dutch are defeated in Indonesia. The Portuguese finally lose their African colonies in the early 1970s. The United Nations and others were pushing for Hawaii and other U.S. colonies to be set free. In Puerto Rico, the U.S. resorted to a gag law and heavy surveillance and harassment of its independence movement. But Eisenhower wanted Hawaii to stay in the U.S. for its strategic military bases. He also believed, falsely as it turned out, that Hawaii would usually vote Republican. In 1959, Hawaii becomes a U.S. state over the objections of Native Hawaiians who wanted to become an independent nation again. What if Eisenhower goes a step farther and decides Guam and Samoa should be U.S. states also? America now has 52 states, 52 stars on its flag. Quite possibly 54 stars in a few years, 54 states, because this would create pressure for Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. to become states. One objection might be that Samoa does not have enough population under the Constitution to be a state. The Constitution says legally you have to have 100,000 people. Eisenhower could simply ignore it, much like Jefferson ignored the Constitution when he bought the Louisiana Territory, or like how Lincoln ignored the population requirement for Nevada when Nevada became a state during the Civil War. Or, the last final solution that might work, Guam and Samoa could be combined into one state. Another time the two territories could become U.S. states would be during the Civil Rights Movement. These are two territories with almost no white people. It's an obvious violation of civil rights and discrimination against non-whites. They might be states at the same time as Washington, D.C. got home rule. Before 1974, the people of D.C., most of them black, had no local self-rule. No city council, no elected mayor. Even matters like road construction were left up to Congress, and they could not vote in national elections. People of D.C. still have no voting congressman, but they can vote for president. 2 or possibly 4 new states changes the outcome of several U.S. national elections and important votes in Congress. There are also 4 or possibly 8 new senators, likely none of them Republican. Non-whites form an influential voting bloc of 12 electoral votes. Nixon's win is closer in 1968. G.H.W. Bush, the older, loses the vote in Congress, allowing him to go to war against Iraq, the Gulf War. G.W. Bush, the younger, never becomes president in 2000, and that means no second Iraq war, since Al Gore opposed going to war against Iraq. And Trump loses the popular vote even more in 2016, and might lose the electoral vote and never become president at all. That means a better America, and not just because of less structural racism, colonialism, and a more diverse Congress. 2 fewer wars, the Gulf War and the Iraq War, and Afghanistan wars. 1 war over sooner, Vietnam. And the most racist president in over a century, Donald Trump, stays a failed businessman instead of a failed president. This is the end of the video. Please repost freely, like, share, and comment. This has been Pacific Island Victory. Look for my other series, What If Natives Won? Latin American Victory, and Sci-Fi Race and Racism. Next time we'll discuss what if Micronesia was independent earlier.